This video was brought to you by Squarespace. From YouTube to memes and flash games, you might think the golden age of the internet is behind us.
But when exactly was it? The 2000s? 2010s?
Could you even pinpoint a single year? I'm hoping I can by the end of this video, but it's not going to be easy. I asked you guys, and out of 5,000 responses, one period stood out from the rest. Whether it was the bizarre nature of early viral videos or their creators, there was something about the early 2010s that felt different.
I want to find out what and whether it deserves that reputation.
Because if we figure out what made the internet so special, maybe we can understand what it lost, and if we can ever get it back. I started off by cutting the decade in thirds. I think there's 3 really distinct eras, but only one of them was peak. From the edgy phase to the early days, I'm revisiting all of them to find out what was really going on.
To find the exact moments where things changed.
And what better place to start than here? The year is 2010. No one has more than like 2 million subscribers, there's roughly half as many people even using the internet, and cats are the pinnacle of humour. Things feel different.
But it's not just because of the stuff people are posting.
There are deep, functional differences with the internet that we'll expose later on. But first, let's get familiar with our surroundings, starting with the site you're on right now. From its 5-star rating system to the era of viral videos, early YouTube was bizarre. For starters, you could do some pretty simple things that would seem alien today, like personalizing your channel. You weren't limited to just the banner and profile picture. The background, layout, and general aesthetic were up to you, which gave creators a lot more control over their homepage. If you were online at the time, you might remember this from Smosh or Fred. In general, there was a larger focus on fostering communities between creators and subscribers. You weren't just picking and choosing topics from randoms. You were actively following and being served content from your subscriptions.
Speaking of which, if you want to join the largest group of Fruitagooners on the internet, consider subscribing.
Anyway, people followed people. This was encouraged by features like the channel page, where viewers could leave comments directly on a creator's profile.
You know how on Instagram people can do those video responses that show up in the comments? Well, YouTube had a similar thing going on.
Under any popular video, there was a reasonable chance you'd find a bunch of people linking their responses. It offered a great way for people to hear the other side of an argument or even just get additional context. Being the internet though, this feature would quickly become problematic. A couple of innovative, business-minded individuals figured out that spamming replies on popular videos featuring their massive, well-rounded takes would give them easy traffic. This was known as the Reply Girls controversy, and in many ways, it never really left us. Anyway, while most of the site was still dominated by short viral videos, the early 2010s saw the explosion of something completely unexpected: the YouTuber. Suddenly, people weren't just getting 1 or 2 breakout hits. They were doing it again and again. And now it was paying them. While a handful of channels achieved this in the late 2000s, it was finally starting to become a legitimate career for thousands. Big names like Smosh, Ray William Johnson, Jenna Marbles, and PewDiePie cemented their place in YouTube history
and set the stage for the chaos to come.
Overall though, there was less of an established content meta, and anything from skits to low-budget Let's Plays had a place. Importantly, a lot of this early content was being made for a single reason:
fun. The future didn't guarantee monetization, so none of these guys really knew if they had a long-term career.
So many people only made stuff because they actually enjoyed making it. This gave creators a more down-to-earth, authentic presence. Still, the minute that serious money entered the picture, things were bound to change. Several events were set in motion that changed the trajectory of the site forever.
But we aren't there quite yet.
The shelf life of the troll face has been borderline insane. It popped up for the first time in 2008, and you can still spot it lurking in the depths of YouTube shorts. Edited over Tom and Jerry clips from the 1940s. Team Tom Chad. Is Tom smart?
Huh?
I'm famous. Dad. Oh, he's still gone. By the early 10s, memes were no longer in their embryonic stage, having evolved since the 90s and 2000s.
Many formats that originated on sites like 4chan and Reddit had been unleashed on the general populace.
This led to the mainstream popularity of rage comics and those top text, bottom text memes with the color wheel backgrounds. Importantly, these all followed similar patterns and leaned on pretty conventional humor, meaning that anyone could understand and create their own.
As you know, that is absolutely not the case anymore. While we continue through the decade, I think we'll find out why that is. Anyway, as each year passed, the landscape kept evolving. Doge, cats with lasers, rainbows, burritos, shooting stars, rickrolling. Stuff was still colourful and simple, but there were plenty of new characters and formats popping up. This will be relevant later on, so just take note of how long some of these memes were around. Going back to YouTube, a lot of internet humour manifested as YTPs and animations. Things like the Asdf movie series and humorous music videos fell within a very strong niche. Still, you can argue that a lot of this was just spilling over from the previous decade, and the 2010s were yet to truly establish their own identity. Considering how chaotic things got from here, you might not be wrong. Before we leave the early 2010s and dive into perhaps the most bizarre period of internet history, there's a couple things we need to touch on. Firstly, gaming. Flash games were obviously massive, but you started to see something else happening with bigger titles. Thanks to Let's Plays and forums, the development and success of new games became somewhat intertwined with the internet. I could list a bunch of examples, but why do that when I only need to mention one? Minecraft spread through the web like wildfire almost immediately upon release. By 2012, it was everywhere. This was propelled by YouTubers, theories, and the simple fact that the game was really good. But again, it wasn't just about these bigger hits. If you didn't have access to the larger titles people were playing, Flash games would fill the void. Happy Wheels, Bloons Tower Defense, shout out to Cool Maths games, and shout out to the internet in general. From 2010 to 2013, it was undeniably a fun place to be. Things like personalization, the laid-back creative nature of YouTube, and meme culture were exciting and easy to engage with. But there's a whole lot more on the horizon, and I can't help the feeling that I've barely scratched the surface. After all, it took only a few short years for things to change completely. The remnants of the old internet would be almost unrecognizable by the end of this next period. But before we dive into that insanity, a quick word from today's sponsor. Whether you're a business owner, creator, or just like design, Squarespace has you covered. It's harder than ever to stand out in a sea of websites, making their integrated SEO tools some of their best features. You can rest easy knowing Squarespace is actively helping you show up more in search, allowing you and your services to grow. If you're more like me and prefer the design aspect, they offer cutting-edge tools that make customization practically limitless. There's tons of colors, fonts, and flexibility. Over at squarespace.com, you can test all of this out with a free trial. Better yet, going to squarespace.com/extramint will save you 10% when purchasing your first website or domain. It's 2014 now, and top text, bottom text is no longer cutting it. Skits are on the way out, and we've officially begun the slow, deranged descent into brain rot. This is marked by the increasingly cryptic nature of memes. Things like MLG and, regrettably, the word dank. On the upside, there's more people online and no shortage of interesting stuff to engage with. Unfortunately, not all of this is received well or looked back on fondly, with many creators distancing themselves from this era today. To find out why that is, I think it's time we check back in on YouTube. Behind the scenes, YouTube had been quietly changing its algorithm. As early as 2012, watch time became a key metric for determining a video's reach and performance. By 2014, the effects of this were in full swing. The platform was no longer dominated by short viral clips, instead providing a framework where regular, lengthy uploads could thrive. This means long, episodic Let's Plays from established creators, and later down the line, 40-minute drama videos with a dude playing surf. But early on, the meta was pretty simple. PewDiePie, Markiplier, and Jacksepticeye were right on top of it, pumping out playthroughs of horror games like Slender. This was all fairly unproblematic, and the same went for other growing niches on the site. Vlogging, makeup tutorials, educational stuff, reviews.
Here it is. It is very cool. I'll give you a quick look at it. I'll turn it around a bit.
However, beneath this thin, brand-friendly veneer was a growing movement that would ultimately change the course of the website forever. This story starts off way back on October the 17th, 2006. A video is uploaded by the channel Too Cool For You 92, showing a kid breakdancing. It's only 11 seconds long and we don't see him again for a few years. That is, until this video. It's made by a newer channel called Disaster Music that begins posting short comedic clips. There's a couple gems in there with titles like Tragedy of the Homeless Crap and even useful tutorials like this one. But nobody cared who this guy was yet.
Until he put on the shirt. I'd like to share with you a little story.
This was the start of Filthy Frank, a character and channel made by George Miller. Only a few days after posting this video, he makes a post on Twitter showing the now iconic pink suit. Even crazier is the caption. "I bought this last night. This is a total game changer. Internet fame, here I come." And with that, he was well on the way. Although I'm not sure he knew what it was gonna take to get there, the things he'd end up doing. George's videos were intentionally bizarre and offensive, pushing against every boundary and almost seeming like a retaliation against YouTube's increasingly corporatized landscape. He wasn't going for sponsorships or monetization. Frankly, I don't know what he was going for, but he was definitely doing it, and pretty well too. Inevitably, other people began to catch on, realizing there was still a space for edgy and absurdist humor. iDubbbz donned a green morph suit. PewDiePie started talking like this.
You want this apple?
Sure, buddy, thank you.
You like it?
Well, I haven't tried it.
And eventually, there was an entire ecosystem of these creators. It's hard to explain if you weren't there, but every time Max Mofo, Frank, and iDubbbz collaborated, it was like the Avengers for the unemployed and casual enjoyers of SJW Gets Owned compilations. Keep in mind, we're only a few years in, and we've already gone from cat memes to people baking and eating PewDiePie's ass hair. But what about when they weren't uploading? What was there to watch? Remember that one dude who made like 30 videos about Mr. Beast's downfall? This is the end for Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast Pregnant Challenge. That's not a new concept at all. While the drama scene today seems pretty relentless, it was nothing compared to peak 2016. We all, yes we, couldn't stop watching 20-minute videos of some 20-something dude in his bedroom talking over surf gameplay. In fact, it's been almost a decade, and that's exactly what you're watching right now. Calling out cringe and absolutely dismantling it was a huge meta in the mid-2010s. These guys pioneered what we call slop today, and some started arguments that still haven't been resolved. Not all of it was simple commentary though, and creators like iDubbbz and H3H3 added in skits and their own characters. However, while this general format has lived on, many of the older creators were forced to abandon some of their methods. And here's why. Around 2017, the influx of edgy and problematic content on YouTube had kinda come to a boiling point. The cringe was too strong. Other issues on YouTube Kids weren't helping, and the attention brought by several large creators' controversial clips made things even worse. One group was feeling the pressure more than anyone else, and unsurprisingly, it happens to be the only group whose opinion mattered. Advertisers. Companies were pulling out left and right. YouTube responded by tightening policy, and suddenly there was no room for this kind of edgy content. Things changed completely in a matter of months. Creators who were already on limited ad revenue were now making close to nothing, and so they stopped. The edgy period collapsed as quickly as it arrived. But what rose from the ashes? How did YouTube actually change after the adpocalypse? We'll come back to that. With so many eyes on drama and edgy creators, YouTube became a prime source for memes. You'd see a lot of green screen formats using YouTubers, and new YTPs were still pulling in numbers. But things weren't as simple as they used to be, and you could safely call this one of the strangest periods for internet humor. Again, these were no longer simple commentaries on relatable, real-life experiences. Almost all of the humor was grounded in or referencing something from the internet. Even a few seconds of an MLG edit had layers of references and inside jokes. As a result, not everyone could really get or appreciate the joke. Not me though. Pull up an MLG edit, the sound air horns. What do? YouTube to MP3 Dank air horn sound effect, copyright free. Next day, posting MLG edits in the classroom by myself. Laughing. Why? I studied, bro. Still, just like the troll face and Doge memes from the early days, there were a few things that stuck around for way too long. Did anyone actually find that B-movie shit funny? The entire B-movie, but every time they say B, it gets 10% faster. The entire B-movie, but bass boosted. I still see people copy-pasting the entire B-movie script. There was this collective obsession with repetition, where stuff was just funny because of how drawn out and ridiculous it was. Like, how many We Are Number One remixes did we really need? I definitely think this was the turning point that got us to where we are today. When even the language of memes is abstract and confusing, their value is no longer just comedic. There's this added layer of feeling like you're part of some special group that understands it. Kind of like when people started making their dark sense of humor part of their personality. The idea that others don't get it is just as much of a draw as the actual entertainment. This started to get pretty bad over the following years, and we'll dig into that soon enough. All in all, the self-titled Dank Era was in decline by 2017. leaving behind some pretty memorable characters. Amidst all of this, another industry had been quietly growing and was set to explode, though I don't think anyone quite expected what we were in for. By the early 2010s, the world had seen its fair share of internet-made artists. Lil B, Soulja Boy. There were plenty of people going viral with small production teams, leveraging sites like YouTube to bypass the traditional gatekeepers of mainstream music. But what happened in the mid-2010s was different. I'm talking, of course, about SoundCloud rappers. Around 2015 to 2016, the scene absolutely blew up, and people heard the names Lil Uzi, Lil Yachty, and XXXTentacion for the first time. Just like Chief Keef in 2012, everyone was covered in designer, held together by Gucci belts and double cups.
You cannot use the double gulp cup.
If you liked the music, this was a really good time to be online. Thanks to the low barrier to entry, there was a constant stream of new releases, and it felt like artists were breaking out every other day. And honestly, even if you didn't like the music, you couldn't deny it was entertaining. A lot of the biggest rappers today either came up during this period or were directly inspired by it. And in the underground scene, SoundCloud is still the place to be. But this wasn't the only industry to come to life in the mid-2010s. Streaming was quickly gaining traction, and it was finally becoming mainstream. Creators like Sodapoppin, Lyric, and Destiny showed that just like YouTube, live streaming was a viable career. And Twitch held all the cards. At the start, it was primarily gaming, but people soon branched out into politics and eventually IRL. This wave of content was completely different to anything before it. You weren't watching a carefully constructed, pre-written narrative unfold for 20 minutes and then turning it off. Instead, you could interact with things as they happened, with the added randomness of live entertainment. It's no surprise things took off. But what is surprising is what happened to the internet after 2017. 2018 to 2020 was a weird time for the internet. YouTube Rewind was still a thing, people really hated it then though, Vine was gone and TikTok had taken its place. But this isn't to say nothing interesting happened over those years. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We saw huge creators rise and fall, the beginning of some of today's most hated practices, and the solidification of the internet as a money-making machine. That being said, some people consider this to be their favorite period online, and we're gonna find out why. How often do you think about thumbnails? Do you ever wonder why we went from seemingly random stills to whatever the f this is? This change has been perhaps one of YouTube's most noticeable. You can pretty easily date a video judging off these tiny little snapshots. Even compare a modern MrBeast video to one from 2017. While this might seem like a trivial observation, it's representative of what's happened to the entire platform. I remember when I first started making videos, I watched this clip of MatPat where he talks about the psychology behind thumbnails. It seemed so obvious while I was watching it, but I never considered how much strategy goes into a single one. There's patterns to how we perceive them, going from the top left to the middle. We respond more to faces with specific expressions. There should be tension, energy, or a story. By the late 2010s, people had more than enough data to really start min-maxing these. Higher contrast, bigger red arrows, and even more red circles. More recently, MrBeast went back and changed all of his thumbnails to show him smiling with his mouth closed rather than open. Why? Because he has enough data to show that people are slightly more inclined to click this expression. Again, you can easily trace these practices back to the latter half of the 2010s. If you weren't relying on ye old methods of clickbait, you had to really work to make your thumbnails stand out in an ever-growing crowd. But this had another unintended consequence that you've definitely picked up on. YouTube lost something. You see, by 2018, the site had well and truly changed. YouTube's 2017 crackdown meant safer, ad-friendly content. The algorithm rewarded frequent, lengthy uploads, and for many, it was no longer a hobby. The evolution of thumbnails exemplifies this change, becoming solely driven by statistics and clickability. To no surprise, this was when the site started to develop a reputation for being sanitized and corporate. The stakes were higher, advertisers held more power than ever before, and creators knew this. If you felt like YouTube became less creative here, it isn't just nostalgia. When the threat of demonetization looms over loose boundaries, people don't just avoid pushing them, they don't even look for them. So we've gone from the Stone Age through to MLG, past dank memes, and here we are. There's two new terms to get uncomfortably familiar with, again. surreal, and irony. To get this started, I went to Surreal Memes and did some honorable, independent YouTube journalism. Right, here's how to make a surreal meme. Surreal memes are essentially dank memes that are so incredibly dank they're on another plane of existence. Surreal memes can be hard to understand for humans at times, but given enough thought, we may be able to find humor in them. Surreal memes are supposed to be hard to comprehend, but are supposed to have some sort of relatable, hidden meaning behind them. In other words, they were doing the whole high IQ Rick and Morty thing at the same time the high IQ Rick and Morty thing was relevant. Surreal memes tie back to what I was saying earlier about memes starting to revolve around making you feel like part of some secret club. There was a painfully obvious performative element of just look at us and how crazy we are. How many layers of irony are you on? At the time though, these were decent enough and a couple were pretty creative. But surreal memes could only cling on for so long, and compared to what followed, they were perfectly cohesive. Because irony was where things got really weird. Humor started to collapse in on itself maybe around 2018, 2019, with memes becoming a lot more cryptic and nonsensical. I'm not going to go over this stage in too much detail, partly because it's impossible, but if you know, you know. At this point, you could see another major shift in how the internet worked. Specifically, memes no longer stuck around for more than a few months. Where the MLG format survived for multiple years, trends had started to come and go faster than ever. This was true for a lot of things: YouTube, music, fashion. There were countless niches, subcultures, and groups. But as everything became more transient and fragmented, it was harder than ever to connect or feel a part of it all. What we lost was a sense of shared identity. This was reflected in the rise of apps like TikTok, where everyone was funneled into highly personalized echo chambers of micro niches and sub-subgenres. Even going back to YouTube, this was when subscribers started to become irrelevant. The algorithm stopped rewarding a loyal following and began prioritizing videos that satisfied whatever fleeting interest you had that day. Why? Because the only metric that matters is how long you keep watching. This isn't always a bad thing, but it does detract from the feeling of community you used to get by curating your subscriptions and being served a blend of your selected interests. Luckily, things like Discord still help with that, and you can join ours at any time. Regardless, we've come a long way, and I think I finally have some answers. Has the internet already peaked? Were you guys right? And was I able to pinpoint a single year? Of course, the answer will always be, it depends, and we have no idea what's coming in the future. But we can do a bit better than just saying it's subjective. After all, it's pretty clear what's fun and what isn't. What made the internet enjoyable in the first place was personalization, entertainment, and community. What's eroded that experience is centralization, excessive moderation, and the feeling that every online space is becoming overly corporate. With this in mind, I think we can safely get the last period out of the way. Now, the mid-2010s. A great period for memes and content in general. Social media wasn't quite as dominant and all-consuming as it is today, and it still felt like something that you used, rather than something that used you. But it was already evident that the internet was changing. Things like the adpocalypse exposed how fragile the system really was, and how the viability of content creation was becoming increasingly tied to diligently following platform policy. By then, the idea of customizing your channel, or even your Google homepage, was well and truly dead. It was the era when personalization, previously a core tenet of the internet experience, took a back seat. So, the early 2010s. The chaos of the 2000s was still very much alive in online culture, but a lot of quality of life stuff had been improved. Sites like YouTube were making it easier than ever for anyone to access and create videos. There were still actually forums, and it wasn't just Reddit. Overall, there was a good balance between fun and functionality. And that's why I think you guys are right. In many ways, the early 2010s were the golden age of the internet. And personally, if I had to pick a single year from this time frame, one that really captured this dynamic, it'd be 2013. But let me know what you think. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't, maybe you think we were an entire decade off. In that case, we might need to go back even further.